from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Guess who I saw walking out of the store carrying that little red bag?
Oh my God.
So this is for you.
Okay, hold on. We gotta work on your surprise face. Ask me. Will you marry me? The good news is you have time to practice between now and then.
They're earrings.
Yeah. A little something to keep your ears warm while I'm in Dublin.
It is leap year, you know. In Ireland, a woman can propose to a man on the 29th of February.
Dad, I'm not going to Dublin.
I'm going to propose to my boyfriend on leap day.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I thought,
Woo! That's the stupidest thing I've ever had.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, leap years. Here to tell us more about them is Krista Teston. Krista is the operator and instructor for the Mallory Kuntz Planetarium right here at UNO. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, Krista, we're going to start just with the basics. What is a leap year?
Well, a leap year was added into a calendar to make up for that additional time. Science is all about finding a balance. It's not perfection.
Okay, and mathematically, we have a graphic that we want to put up for our viewers. So mathematically, what are we talking about here?
So most people have been around and realize every 4 years we add another day in February, and that we're calling the leap day. And the reason we have it is because it's astronomy. The sun, Earth is going around the sun, and most people say, oh, it's 365 days. Well, that's not exactly right. It's a little bit more. So in order to factor in that extra 0.24, not 0.25, but 0.24 days, we had to do a little bit of math when we added our calendar. So every 4 years, we add an extra day. That is a quarter turn. Mm-hmm. So that gets us our 365 and a quarter, but it's actually 365.24. So that's when we have to add in the extra, if it's 100 year, we don't. But if it's divided by 400, then we have another day in there. So it's a mathematical game, and it's still not perfect.
Yeah, I was going to say,
still not
even
perfect.
in the research that I did, they'll tell you, it still doesn't quite solve the problem. When people say that to you, how do you respond to them then?
Well, we will be off by a day, but it's going to take us 3,030 years for that day to accumulate after you've done your multiply by 4 and divide by 100 and divide by 400.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we have another graphic. Mm-hmm. Which years are and are not leap years then?
Okay, so most people realize it's every 4 years. But then there are a couple of times we don't have one, and those are the 100 years. However, if the year is divided by 400 evenly, like in the year 2000 on our graphic, then we don't have a leap year. So you can see 2000, no leap year, and then we have every 4 years. So that's where you get that pattern right there. So we will have a skip a leap year in 2300.
Okay. As a visual learner, I'm really grateful for these
2400.
graphics. Yeah. So when was all of this introduced, Krista?
Well, it actually started with Julius Caesar. He was the one who created a calendar where he added an extra day every 4 years to make up for that quarter turn. But he's a little bit off.
Okay, says
says the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
And okay, so Pope Gregory added in the additional, if it's 100 years, then we'll skip it. But if it's divided by 400 years, then we keep it. And so that ended up reducing the error, but there's still that little error.
Okay, yeah, so Pope Gregory the 13th, we're going to put his photo up. Krista, what's really important to know about this man as we're talking about something as historic as this? Yeah?
Well, this ties into the religious aspect of, especially with when we get to the world map, we'll see the Christianity and where it was ruled. So Pope Gregory, of course, had the rule, and he determined that because a lot of the other cultures and religions would add their extra day or extra month, depending on the culture, whenever they felt like it. It almost seemed like. So he wanted a little bit more structure. So he added that in with his reign and changing over to the Gregorian calendar. So here we have our world map, and we can see in the pink, that's our Roman Christianity or Christendom. And then we also have our Protestants. And then we also have our other religions. So you can see there, we have the dark blue, and then the Spanish, as they conquered the New World, they were added in, and eventually they added the Gregorian calendar onto. And then the Portuguese discoveries, those extenuating countries and out on the outliers there. So the actual changeover to the Gregorian calendar took hundreds and hundreds of years. There was a lot of resistance, and I think a lot of that was due to a lot of the other cultural religions. I mean, Christianity, of course, was the first one to jump on the bandwagon, and that still took 100 years, to really get all the Christian communities in on the Gregorian calendar, and then adding in the other, a lot of people still celebrate the Chinese New Year. That's not a Gregorian calendar thing.
Okay, so, and we do have a graphic that actually shows when those folks did get on board, and I want to put that up just so that as you're talking about hundreds of years, people really do have an idea of who came in first and then kind of how we went from there. So walk us through that, Krista.
Yeah. So you think of nowadays with all the technology, information is instantaneous, but not so way back when with Pope Gregory. So in 1699, that's when the Protestants added on, because they're very similar to some of the Roman Catholics. And then by the time 1752, that's your England and your colonies. And Sweden held out a little bit longer, 1753. And then you notice a big, huge leap, 1873 for Japan. And then we had the 1912 for China. So again, you're thinking of your Asian culture, some of your Eastern religions. They're very based on a lunar system versus a solar system. So they weren't as affected by their calendar. And then 1918 was the Soviet Union, and last holdout was Greece in 1923. That really isn't that long ago, especially when we're talking geology and astronomy distances and years. And
I think, too, you look at a list like that, and I don't know, maybe I'm just that person. I think about the discussions that must have taken place over something like that had been established. So
I don't know if I'd call them discussions. It would probably be very strong debate.
Well, yeah. I mean, so you look at the
lots of
span
arguments
in terms of when people signed on, but yeah, so how did those conversations get started? What types of things did transpire and so forth? And again, all dependent on what was going on in the world at that time. Yeah. But I find that fascinating.
And just because the government adopted those changes doesn't mean that the common person did. Yeah. So when we got into some of the Eastern countries, they actually adopted it as a civil calendar, so that they still have their religious calendar, the Hindus and Chinese.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And you brought the word culture up a number of times.
Yes.
Of course, people came on board at various times, but they also celebrate or recognize leap days and leap years in different ways. I want to start with Ireland and Bachelor's Day.
Okay. So that's kind of where your video clip came from the movie, and I didn't even realize there was a movie. So the idea was, it was approached to St. Patrick that women should have the right to ask for a proposal of marriage. And St. Patrick decided, well, okay, we'll agree to this. So they picked the day that happened least often. So that's the leap year, the leap day, and then it was acceptable for women to ask men for a proposal of marriage.
What does that look like today there, though? Are women rushing to do that like we're kind of maybe led to believe that they are, or is it really more of a...
No, it's more of just a kind of a more of a historical interest. It's not common. I mean, I'm sure the individual would say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, but it's not as common.
Okay, all right. Now, how is the United Kingdom different?
Oh, so as it spread from Ireland across, we have Scotland, and then we have British. They kind of fell in line too. Women, it's okay if women would ask men to marry, but you better be careful, because if the men said no, that they did not, then there was a little bit of I don't know, not prizes, but they had to pay for saying no, and they paid in several different ways.
Well, talk about that. That's interesting.
I read a couple of different places. Sometimes the men would pay for yards and yards of fabric to make beautiful skirts. Or my favorite was the gloves. And depending on the different cultures, sometimes it was 12 gloves, sometimes it was just these gorgeously expensive gloves, and it's to cover up the woman's hand because she doesn't have a ring. She doesn't have an engagement ring. He said no.
So these 12 gloves, so why 12? Is there a reason behind the number there, or?
There is, but I saw lots of places where they didn't give the number.
Okay.
So you think about the length of time. There's 12 months in a year. I didn't really see an exact why it had to be 12.
Yeah.
It's just there were some people that believed 12 was just this really good number to have.
Okay. All right. And babies born on or during a leap year, right, on the 29th.
Uh-huh.
When do they celebrate their birthdays?
Well, if you're in Scotland, it's bad luck to be born on leap day.
Why is that?
It was just a superstition.
Huh.
Actually, in Scotland, it's the superstition is it's bad to be married during the whole year of leap year.
And where did that trace back to? Really?
The gloves.
Wow.
The whole proposing and being turned down, and
okay.
they just.
So when do the babies celebrate their birthdays then?
It varies. It's really an individual thing. They most often celebrate either the day before or the day after, so the 28th or the 1st of March. In the United States, DMV kind of determines state by state on how you're going to be identified as when your birth is or what your birth date is for your DMV driver's license. Same thing with different cultures, different countries across the world will record it differently. But it's about a 50-50 split on whether you celebrate on the 28th or on the 1st of March. Okay,
one of the things that I thought might be interesting for our viewers is to maybe look at some of the celebrities who celebrate February 29th is their birthdays. They're leapers.
They're
so
leapers.
We're going to put the leapers up on the screen right now, and you and I can kind of keep talking. But I found this fascinating. They put it in chronological order.
Yes. Yep.
Pope Paul. Yeah, it's kind of with each name you see, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Didn't realize that. So I thought that viewers at home would be interested in seeing. Yeah,
Al and Tony Robinson. It's not what he's noted for. Of course, that's toward the end is when the younger audience is going to go, oh yeah, Ja Rule, I know who that person is, and Chris Connolly, I know who that person is. But yeah, it's amazing. My daughter is in elementary school, and they'll go and they'll figure out how old would they be if they're a leaper, because they're only celebrating 1/4 of their birthdays.
I suppose. All right, St. Oswald. What can you tell us about St. Oswald?
Oh, St. Oswald Day, he died on leap day.
Okay.
So they, so in the leap year, they celebrated on leap day, but otherwise they celebrated on the 28th. And he, again, religious person who who was a Christian leader. And he died on Leap Day, so they have a special celebration, just like St. Patrick's Day, which is also coming up. And all the saints have their special day, and his is Leap Day.
So I have to ask Krista a little bit about your background, right? Somebody who's very interested in leap years, obviously knows a thing or two about it. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my interest actually started with the astronomy side and how the sun is aligning with different constellations. A lot of people like astrology. That's another kind of interest. It's just like, oh, that's interesting. So leap year is the same thing for me. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And running the planetarium, I blend the science in with the technology and with history and culture, and we bring in myths and legends. So we tie that all together with the science.
Okay, and I wanted to ask, you're an educator at heart. So how did you become involved in the education arena? And then we'll talk about your journey here to UNO.
Oh, I actually was encouraged to become an engineer from my high school teachers. And I spent 3.5 years in engineering school, but I loved teaching the kids that came in for engineering days. And so I switched to education.
Okay. Most commonly asked question that you got back in those days from the students in terms of what you were teaching?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I can tell you what's happening now. They all want to know if aliens are real and know about black holes. Back then, it's from my peers, it's more like, why do you want to be a teacher and not an engineer, just financially? And that's just enjoyment and fulfillment. Okay. And
so you were actually at a planetarium before you came to UNO. What was your life before you came here?
Yes, before I came here, that was the second planetarium. I actually started running a planetarium in college. It was an internship, a student working job, and I was into biology education at the time, and I switched over to earth science education. So because of the planetarium and liking the astronomy and the earth sciences and the geology. But before I came here at UNO, I was running a portable planetarium out of the Journey Museum in Rapid City, South Dakota, while my husband was going to grad school.
What is the draw for you in terms of that kind of work? This being your third
yeah. You know, it's not the pay, it's not the time,
right,
but it's the enjoyment, the interest that I get to blend in the science, the math, and I also get to include storytelling and mythology and legends and seamlessly blend them into educating people of all ages. I see preschoolers at the planetarium. I see grandparents bringing their kids going, I remember the planetarium when I was 8, 9, 10. Mm-hmm. So that's very fulfilling for me.
Audience, a big consideration, Krista, especially in education. So when you think about the various age groups,
mm-hmm.
you know, your job is not an easy one. Not only are you trying to blend some of these more complicated subject matters, but now you're having to deal with people of all ages. How do you prepare, for example, talking to young kids versus the college students? Then you get into the older adults. I mean, how does that work for you to actually pull all of that together and be relatable?
It's a talent. I don't know. It's pretty easy for me. A lot of it has to do with language. And knowing your audience, you know, what, like for talking about leap year,
Mm-hmm.
When I was looking at it, you asked me first of all to come in, and I was thinking, oh, the science, the math, the science, and then we ended up looking at it and looking at the cultures and the religions, and so being able to take that audience from, you know, oh, I don't like science, I'm scared of science, and saying, hey, science is interesting, science is creative, and bringing that in and getting people that are interested. They come to me, oh, so you're going to talk to me about astrology, and I'm like, well, that's not really a science, but I'll talk to you about the zodiac constellations and you know, your sun sign if you want, where the sun was when you were born. So it's kind of I deal a lot of myth busting in the earth sciences and natural sciences as a live presenter on the fly.
For those people who are not familiar with the planetarium, especially the one here at UNO, how would you describe big picture perspective what it is, and then we can talk a little bit more specifically about your role and all the different projects that you have going on. So a planetarium, especially the one here at UNO, how do you explain that to people?
Well, a lot of people don't realize what a planetarium is. They think that they're going to go and look at the stars. We're going to be outside on the rooftop. And that's not true. Actually, our planetarium is located in the heart of Durham Science Center. We're walking down into not quite the basement level to go, and we're looking at stars projected on the ceiling on this big, huge dome. So we talk about how the sound travels before the audience really even gets into the program, which, you know, traditionally was astronomy, but I can present everything from, you know, your natural sciences to we can do underwater exploration. We can talk history. I've had some friends show the Sistine Chapel roof in their planetarium.
Wow. And so the projects then outside of all of that. So what is a day in your life like?
Oh, it varies so much. Because technically my job at the planetarium is part-time right now.
Okay.
So I spend a lot of my time preparing for a program. I've got some student workers that I help. You know, we look at research. Just like for this leap year, it's like, okay, I have to review what do I know or what do I learn, and how I'm going to present it to a diverse audience. What is the audience going to be interested in? So that takes a lot of research and time. And then, of course, staying current on the science, what's happening. You know, everybody wants to know about black holes, or the last couple of months, it's been the star Betelgeuse. Well, if you don't know about that, you have to do a lot of research. And that's just part of my job. And then I also teach for the physics department here at UNO. So I do some online classes, and occasionally I'll get an astronomy lecture or lab class.
Okay, so
I do that too.
Are you presenting on leap year currently?
No, that's my weekend off. I get a weekend off.
So what is the talk then as you work departmentally with something like leap years? Have you been hearing quite a bit about it? Considering it only happens every 4 years, is there anything going on here at the university or conversations that are taking place that may not have otherwise?
I have not noticed as much. At the college level, everybody's kind of experienced a couple leap years by now. So it's like, oh, it's just one of those things that happen every 4 years. But you go to my kids' school, in the elementary school, it's a big deal. So they do a lot of, well, what happens on leap years? So they do a lot of the cultural things.
What are the celebrations that are going on now in the schools? How are educators teaching students about something like leap years when your kids are talking to you?
Well, leap year's pretty easy because they can bring in the middle school kids. We can bring in the math and talk about fractions. So even in third grade, my daughter's learning about fractions in 1/4. Well, you get 4 of them together and you have a day.
Yeah.
So approaching it that way. Or they also are looking at inclusion and diversity and learning about different cultures too. So even at the beginning of the year, my daughter was learning about how different cultures celebrated birthdays. So that would tie into your leapers. How do they celebrate their birthday? Is it on the 28th or the 1st? Or, you know, do they consider themselves 40 years old or 10 years old?
Yeah, teaching moments across the board, right?
Exactly.
In terms of what you're dealing with. Now, you said you're off, so I was going to ask you, talking about leap years today, what will you be doing on Leap Day 2020?
Well, it's a Saturday. I'm going to lay back and hang out with my family. Usually I'm preparing for a planetarium show in the evening, and I just hang out a couple hours a day with my family. So this is going to be an all-day family day.
With the variety that you have, Krista, in terms of coming from the world of education and all the things that you have mentioned and the challenge of bringing them all together, what topic, what subject do you get most excited about? And
that's
why?
The nice thing about the planetarium is I can get excited about just about anything.
But is there one thing in particular that really just, I don't know, that just really drives your passion?
It actually varies from day to day. I feel like I'm a librarian a lot of times with so many vast interests that I just seem to go from one topic to another as my interest. And it shows in my shows. when you come to the planetarium, 1 month I'll focus on one type of thing, and then another month I might focus on something completely different.
Yeah. Now, do you have a support system? You said you're part-time.
I'm part-time.
But talk about the staffing there at the planetarium when you talk about these events that you're putting together. Are you kind of flying solo, or do you have a support base, students maybe pitching in?
For the most part, I'm flying solo. It'll vary semester to semester if I have a student worker, but 99% of the time, I'm a one-woman show.
Okay. So in the spirit of the subject matter today, leap years, so we go fast forward to 2024,
Yes.
right? Where will the planetarium be in terms of, are there changes in the works? If we fast forward 4 years, what's that going to look like? And then where will you be 4 years from now?
What I think it should look like and what might actually happen are two totally different ideas.
What do you think it should look like?
Well, it for me, realistically, it'll all depend on Durham Science Center is discussing an upgrade. So there's a big financial burden with that. So that's kind of where the planetarium update and upgrade is going to be, is when the building is getting upgraded.
What about you? Where are we going to find you 4 years from now?
I don't know. I'm just excited to finish my master's here in May. I might be working on a PhD. I'm thinking about it in STEM education, so I can continue tying in my cultures and my religions in with my science, making everyone interested in appreciating the world around them.
Well, we appreciate you educating us a little bit more about leap years today and just about yourself and the planetarium. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. Thanks to our students for working so hard behind the scenes today, and of course our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at the old market as seen through the lens of Cheyenne De Leon. She's a senior right here at UNO. We will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.